Sometimes the biggest accidents in life are the ones that quietly lead us home. The quiet neighborhood of Maple Ridge usually woke up one gentle sound at a time. A lawn sprinkler clicked across fresh-cut grass. A golden retriever barked at squirrels that never seemed to learn. Somewhere down the street, a pickup truck rumbled to life before the morning sun had fully climbed above the rows of maple trees. Marcus Bennett had lived on Willow Lane for almost 9 years, long enough to know which porch light belonged to an insomniac, which mailbox leaned after every winter storm, and which children raced their bicycles to the school bus every weekday at exactly 7:18 a.m. His own mornings never changed much either. At 39, Marcus had learned that routine was often the strongest bridge holding together a life that had once fallen apart. After losing his wife years earlier, every sunrise became less about chasing dreams and more about keeping promises. Breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. A packed lunch with one handwritten joke tucked inside the paper bag. A quick stop to water the tomato plants before leaving for another day building cabinets and repairing old homes across town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and honesty was one thing Marcus still believed never went out of style. That Tuesday morning seemed no different. Lily had already climbed onto the school bus with a cheerful wave, her bright smile disappearing around the corner as Marcus carried an empty coffee mug toward the kitchen sink. Outside, a warm June breeze drifted through the open window above the counter, carrying the scent of blooming roses from next door. The house beside his had been empty for months until a moving truck arrived over the weekend. He had only caught brief glimpses of the new neighbor unloading boxes alone, a woman about his age with calm gray eyes and an easy smile that never lingered long enough for introductions. He figured there would be time for that eventually. As Marcus reached to close the kitchen window before leaving for work, something unexpected happened. His eyes drifted, only for the briefest instant, toward the neighboring homes. Upstairs window, where the curtains had been left partially open while someone reorganized the room. Realizing he had accidentally looked toward a private moment, Marcus reacted immediately. He turned away so quickly that he nearly bumped into the counter, his face warming with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," he muttered instinctively, even though he doubted anyone had heard him through 2 houses and a stretch of green lawn. But someone had. A soft laugh floated across the quiet morning air. Marcus looked down instead of back. Footsteps approached the neighboring porch. Then came a warm, amused voice that carried no anger, no accusation, only surprising confidence. "Well," the woman called gently, "looks like you owe me a future." Marcus slowly lifted his eyes just enough to see Claire Sullivan standing on her front porch, fully dressed now in a light blue sweater and jeans, holding a cardboard box against her hip with the relaxed expression of someone who had already decided how the story would end. She wasn't upset. She wasn't offended. In fact, she was smiling as though she had just shared a private joke with an old friend. Marcus blinked, completely speechless. "Excuse me," he finally managed. Claire tilted her head with playful sincerity. "I said, you have to take responsibility." The breeze continued rustling through the maple leaves as birds sang somewhere above them, but for Marcus Bennett, the entire neighborhood had suddenly become impossibly still. Marcus stood frozen for another few seconds after Claire disappeared back inside her house. He had faced angry customers, impossible construction deadlines, and the heartbreaking silence that followed losing the love of his life, but somehow one playful sentence from a woman he barely knew had left him completely unprepared. He rubbed the back of his neck, let out a slow breath, and quietly shook his head. What in the world did she mean by that? He whispered to himself. The drive to his workshop felt longer than usual. Every red light gave his thoughts another chance to replay the strange encounter. Her smile had not been sarcastic. Her voice had not carried even a trace of resentment. If anything, she had sounded amused, almost as though she had planned to say those words long before they had ever met. Marcus could not understand it. He had spent most of his adult life believing misunderstandings should be corrected immediately. Instead, he had driven away with even more questions than when the morning had begun. By lunchtime, he was sanding the edge of a custom oak dining table when his longtime co-worker, Ethan Brooks, noticed his unusual silence. "You have barely said 5 words all morning," Ethan remarked while measuring cabinet doors. "Everything all right?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "Something awkward happened with my new neighbor." Ethan raised one eyebrow. "Awkward good or awkward bad?" Marcus sighed. "I honestly cannot tell." He explained the accidental glance, his immediate apology, and Claire's unexpected response. Ethan stared for a moment before bursting into warm laughter. "Marcus, only something like that could happen to you." Marcus folded his arms. "I am serious." "I know you are." Ethan smiled. "That is exactly why it is funny. If anyone in this town would accidentally end up in an embarrassing situation without meaning to, it would be you." Marcus managed a reluctant smile, but it faded quickly. What if she was offended and just hid it well? Ethan shrugged. Then why smile? Marcus had no answer. That evening, the familiar comfort of home usually settled his restless mind. Lily sat at the kitchen table coloring pictures while country music played softly from an old radio near the window. The smell of homemade chicken noodle soup filled the house, mixing with the scent of fresh bread warming in the oven. It was the kind of ordinary evening Marcus treasured because ordinary had once felt impossible. As he placed 2 bowls on the table, Lily looked up with innocent curiosity. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Did you meet the new neighbor today?" Marcus nearly dropped the spoon in his hand. "Why do you ask?" "Because she came over this afternoon while you were still working." Marcus turned around immediately. "She did?" Lily nodded happily. "She brought blueberry muffins. She said she wanted to welcome us to the neighborhood even though she is the new one." Marcus blinked in surprise. "That sounds thoughtful." Lily smiled. "She also said she hopes we become good friends." Before Marcus could process that sentence, a gentle knock echoed across the front door. Father and daughter looked at each other. Marcus opened the door to find Claire standing on the porch with an empty pie dish tucked beneath one arm and the same calm smile he remembered from that morning. The golden light of sunset rested softly across the quiet street as she looked directly into his eyes. "Good evening, Marcus," she said warmly. "I was wondering if you were ready to start taking responsibility." Marcus stood on the porch for a long moment, one hand still resting on the doorknob while Claire waited with effortless patience. The evening air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass, and somewhere farther down the street a wind chime played softly against the fading light. Lily peeked around her father with wide curious eyes before offering Claire an enthusiastic smile. Claire returned it immediately. "Hello again, Lily." "Hi, Miss Claire." Marcus cleared his throat. "I think I owe you an apology before anything else." Claire tilted her head slightly. "You already apologized this morning." "I know, but I still feel terrible." She smiled with quiet understanding. "Marcus, accidents happen. If I believed you had meant any disrespect, I would not be standing on your porch bringing back your pie dish." He looked relieved, but only for a second. "Then, what exactly did you mean about taking responsibility?" Claire laughed so softly that it almost disappeared into the evening breeze. "Would you like to come next door for a minute?" Marcus hesitated. Lily gently tugged his sleeve. "Go, Daddy. I can finish my homework." He looked at his daughter, then back at Claire, finally nodding. "I will only be a few minutes." Claire's house still smelled of fresh paint and unopened cardboard boxes. Furniture had been arranged, but framed photographs leaned against the walls instead of hanging neatly in place. Lamps rested on the floor waiting for side tables that had not yet been assembled. The home looked lived in and unfinished at the same time, as though someone had moved in physically while their heart was still unpacking. Claire placed the pie dish on the kitchen counter before leading Marcus toward the spacious living room. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, painting long golden lines across polished hardwood floors. Near the fireplace stood several heavy bookshelves still wrapped in protective blankets. Marcus immediately noticed loose boards stacked carefully beside them. His carpenter's instincts took over before he even thought about speaking. "These shelves are custom built," he observed. "Beautiful oak." Claire nodded. "They belong to my late husband." Her smile softened but never disappeared completely. "He built them himself years ago." Marcus looked down respectfully. "I am sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Silence settled gently between them, not awkward but thoughtful. After a moment Claire folded her hands together and met his eyes again. "Now I can finally explain what I meant." Marcus waited quietly. "This morning you accidentally looked toward my window." He immediately lowered his eyes. "Yes. Then you turned away faster than anyone I have ever seen." She smiled again. Most people would have stared another second before pretending they had not. Marcus looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I was raised better than that." "Exactly." Claire nodded. "That is why I knew it was an accident." Marcus blinked. Then I decided you owed me something." He looked confused again. Claire pointed toward the unfinished bookshelves. "Responsibility." Marcus followed her gesture. "For these?" "For helping your stubborn new neighbor who refuses to admit she cannot move half her furniture alone." Marcus stared for a second before laughing for the first time all day. The tension that had weighed on his shoulders quietly disappeared. "So that was your plan?" Claire smiled with playful satisfaction. "You were always going to help eventually. I simply found a memorable way to ask." Marcus shook his head with amused disbelief. "You realize I have spent the entire day wondering whether I needed to hire a lawyer." Claire laughed freely now, the warm sound filling the quiet house. In a way that made the empty rooms feel unexpectedly alive. "No lawyer necessary," she replied. "Just a good carpenter who keeps his promises." Marcus looked around the unfinished home once more before rolling up the sleeves of his work shirt. "Well then," he said with a quiet smile that surprised even himself, "show me where we should start." The next Saturday arrived wrapped in gentle sunshine and the quiet promise of unhurried hours. Marcus parked his old pickup truck in Claire's driveway just after 8 o'clock, the truck bed filled with his toolbox, clamps, wood glue, and every hand tool he thought they might need. Before he could step out, Lily had already opened the passenger door and skipped across the lawn with the energy only an 8-year-old could possess. Claire opened her front door before they reached the porch. She wore a comfortable green sweater, faded blue jeans, and work gloves tucked into her back pocket. "Good morning," she said with a smile bright enough to rival the clear June sky. "I hope both of you came hungry." Marcus lifted an eyebrow. "Hungry? Nobody builds furniture on an empty stomach." The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted through the doorway, followed by rich coffee and sizzling bacon. Marcus laughed quietly. "You planned this?" Claire folded her arms with playful confidence. "Of course I did." After breakfast, the three of them carried the heavy oak shelves into the living room one careful step at a time. Marcus measured each wall twice before touching a single tool. "Wood remembers every mistake," he explained as Lily watched with complete fascination. "That is why you never rush." Claire leaned against the doorway listening carefully. "That sounds like advice about more than carpentry." Marcus smiled without looking up. "Usually it is." The morning settled into a peaceful rhythm. The soft buzz of a cordless drill blended with birds singing outside open windows. Sunlight poured across the hardwood floor while tiny dust particles floated through warm golden beams like slow-moving stars. Lily happily sorted screws into small plastic containers, announcing each size as though she were managing an important construction. Company. Claire unpacked family photographs from carefully labeled boxes, occasionally stopping to wipe away a thin layer of dust before placing each frame on the mantel. Marcus noticed one photograph showing Claire standing beside a smiling man holding the very bookshelf they were rebuilding together. The picture had been taken years earlier, yet the happiness captured inside it still felt alive. He quietly handed the frame to Claire without saying a word. She accepted it with grateful eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. There was no need to explain anything else. By early afternoon the largest bookshelf stood securely against the wall, perfectly level from end to end. Claire stepped back and admired it with folded hands. He would have loved seeing this. Marcus tightened the final screw before wiping his hands with a clean cloth. He built it well. It just needed someone to help it stand again. Claire looked toward him, hearing something deeper inside those simple words. Before she could answer, Lily appeared carrying 3 glasses of homemade lemonade balanced carefully on a tray. "Construction crew break," she announced proudly. They laughed together and gathered on the back patio overlooking Claire's small garden. Bees drifted lazily between blooming lavender while a gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. For the first time since moving into the neighborhood, Claire did not feel like a visitor. She felt as though the house itself had finally begun breathing again. Marcus watched Lily telling one of her endless stories about school while Claire listened with genuine interest instead of polite obligation. It had been a long time since he had seen his daughter become comfortable around someone so quickly. Children noticed kindness long before adults did. As the afternoon light softened into warm amber, Claire looked across the yard separating their 2 homes and smiled quietly. There was still plenty of furniture left to assemble, walls waiting for pictures, and boxes that had not yet been opened, but somehow the house no longer seemed unfinished. Without anyone noticing exactly when it happened, 3 strangers had begun to feel less like neighbors and a little more like family. The weeks that followed settled into a comforting rhythm that neither Marcus nor Claire had expected. Every evening after work, Marcus would cross the narrow stretch of grass separating their homes with a toolbox in one hand and quiet determination in the other. Some days they repaired furniture. Other days they painted walls, installed light fixtures, or rebuilt an old garden bench that had nearly fallen apart after years of rain and winter snow. Lily became the unofficial supervisor of every project, proudly wearing a small canvas tool belt Marcus had made especially for her. Claire laughed every time Lily announced another inspection, pretending to write notes on a tiny clipboard she had decorated with colorful stickers. The laughter slowly filled rooms that had once echoed with silence. One Thursday evening, heavy gray clouds gathered above Maple Ridge, bringing a gentle summer rain that drummed softly against the roof. The 3 of them sat around Claire's dining table eating homemade chicken pot pie while warm light from a single pendant lamp made the room feel smaller and somehow safer. Outside, rainwater rolled slowly down the windows, blurring the streetlights into golden circles. Lily excused herself after dinner to finish reading a library book in the living room, leaving Marcus and Claire quietly clearing the dishes together. Neither spoke for several moments. The silence felt peaceful rather than uncomfortable. Marcus rinsed the plates while Claire dried them with a cotton towel, each movement falling into an effortless rhythm. Finally Claire broke the silence. "You know," she said softly, "I almost never invited people into this house before you came along." Marcus glanced toward her. "Really?" She nodded. "I told everyone I was too busy unpacking." That was only half the truth. She carefully placed another plate inside the cabinet before continuing. "After Daniel passed away, I convinced myself that keeping people at a distance would make life easier." Marcus remained quiet, giving her the space to continue without interruption. "It did not," she admitted with a faint smile. "It only made the rooms quieter." Rain continued tapping gently against the glass as Marcus folded the dish towel in his hands. "I understand that more than you probably realize." Claire looked at him with quiet curiosity. Marcus leaned lightly against the kitchen counter. After my wife passed away, everyone kept telling me time would heal everything. He smiled gently without bitterness. Time helped me survive. Lily gave me a reason to keep living. Those are two different things. Claire lowered her eyes, absorbing every word. You never talk about her very much. Marcus nodded slowly. Some memories are too precious to explain. They deserve silence instead. Claire felt something shift inside her. She had met successful people, confident people, charming people, but very few who carried grief with such quiet dignity. Marcus never asked for sympathy. He never tried to impress anyone with stories of sacrifice. He simply kept showing up every morning, raising his daughter with kindness and choosing decency even when no one was watching. That quiet strength was becoming impossible to ignore. At that very moment Lily appeared in the doorway holding an old family photograph she had discovered while exploring one of Claire's unpacked boxes. "Miss Claire," she asked innocently, "is this your husband?" Claire walked over and gently accepted the framed picture. Daniel stood beside her beneath a large oak tree, both of them smiling toward the camera on what looked like an autumn afternoon years before. Claire brushed her thumb lightly across the glass before answering. "Yes, sweetheart. That was Daniel." Lily studied the photograph thoughtfully before looking back at Claire. "He looks nice." Claire smiled through glistening eyes. "He really was." Lily wrapped both arms around Claire's waist without another word. Claire froze for only a heartbeat before returning the hug with quiet gratitude. Marcus watched from across the room as the rain continued falling outside. In that simple embrace, he realized some wounds did not heal because someone tried to fix them. They healed because someone gently reminded another heart that it was finally safe to feel hope again. By the middle of July, Maple Ridge had quietly accepted a new routine. It was no longer unusual to see Marcus repairing a flower bed outside Claire's house while Lily and Claire planted colorful daisies nearby. Neighbors waved as they drove past, children rode bicycles up and down the sidewalks, and life seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm that felt almost too good to question. Then, one ordinary Friday afternoon, everything shifted with a single phone held in the wrong hands. Marcus had just finished installing custom kitchen cabinets across town when his customer hesitated before signing the final invoice. The older gentleman cleared his throat awkwardly. "Marcus, I hope you do not mind me asking something." Marcus smiled politely. "Go ahead." The man turned his phone around. On the neighborhood social media page was a blurry photograph taken from across the street weeks earlier. It showed Marcus standing outside Claire's upstairs window on that first morning. The image captured only a single frozen moment, stripped away from everything that had happened before and after. Above it, someone had written, "Is this really the kind of man we want living in Maple Ridge?" Hundreds of comments had already appeared beneath the post. Some urged people not to jump to conclusions. Others assumed the worst without asking a single question. Marcus quietly handed the phone back. His expression never changed, but something behind his eyes became heavier. "Thank you for showing me," he said calmly. The customer looked embarrassed. "I did not believe it for a second." Marcus nodded with quiet gratitude. "I appreciate that." He loaded his tools into the truck without another word. During the drive home, the familiar roads felt strangely unfamiliar. Every stop sign seemed longer. Every passing car made him wonder who had already seen the photograph. By the time he reached Willow Lane, several neighbors who normally greeted him with friendly smiles now offered only uncertain glances before looking away. Marcus simply carried his toolbox inside without trying to explain anything. That evening Lily came home unusually quiet. She placed her backpack beside the kitchen table and slowly climbed onto her chair. Marcus immediately noticed the difference. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" Lily looked down at her folded hands. "Some kids at summer camp said people were talking about you." Marcus pulled out the chair beside her instead of standing across the room. What exactly did they say? Lily hesitated. They asked if you were a bad person. The question landed harder than any accusation aimed directly at him ever could have. Marcus gently reached across the table and held his daughter's small hand. Lily, listen to me very carefully. She looked into his eyes. A picture can only show 1 second. It cannot show a person's heart. She nodded slowly. I know you are good, Daddy. Marcus smiled softly. That is enough for me. Across the narrow lawn, Claire returned home just before sunset after meeting with a client downtown. She noticed several unread messages waiting on her phone, each asking nearly the same uncomfortable question. One even included the same photograph now spreading through the neighborhood. Claire stopped walking halfway up her front steps. She stared at the image for several long moments before quietly closing her eyes. She remembered exactly what had happened that morning. She remembered Marcus turning away instantly. She remembered his sincere apology before she had even spoken. She remembered every detail because she had been there. Yet someone else had chosen to tell a different story. She looked toward Marcus's darkened kitchen window, where the warm glow of a single lamp illuminated the silhouette of a father helping his daughter with homework. Neither of them knew she was watching. Claire drew a slow breath as the evening breeze rustled through the maple trees. The neighborhood had accepted a lie because lies often traveled faster than quiet truth. But deep inside, she made one promise to herself. She would not allow the kindest man she had ever met to carry the weight of someone else's false story alone. The following morning dawned bright and clear, but the warmth of the summer sun could not erase the tension that had quietly settled over Maple Ridge. Neighbors still walked their dogs, children still chased one another along the sidewalks. And sprinklers still clicked across green lawns, yet conversation seemed to pause whenever Marcus appeared. He greeted everyone with the same gentle smile he always had, carrying lumber from his truck before leaving for another day of work, refusing to defend himself against rumors he knew were not true. Claire watched from her front porch, her coffee untouched in her hands. She admired many things about Marcus, but his silence was beginning to trouble her. It was not the silence of guilt. It was the silence of a man who believed dignity mattered more than arguments. Even so, she knew that quiet character alone would not erase a false story spreading through the neighborhood. Later that afternoon, Claire visited the Maple Ridge Community Association office to reserve the clubhouse for an upcoming charity garden meeting. While speaking with the property manager, she noticed a security monitor displaying recordings from cameras positioned near the neighborhood entrance. An unexpected thought crossed her mind. "Do your cameras cover Willow Lane?" she asked. The manager nodded. "Several angles." "Why?" Claire explained only enough to request access to the footage from the morning she had moved into her house. The manager reviewed her identification, then searched the archived recordings. Within minutes, the video appeared on the screen. Claire leaned forward without saying a word. The footage told the complete story. It showed Marcus standing inside his own kitchen before briefly looking toward the open window by accident. It showed him immediately turning away, stepping back from the window, lowering his eyes, and speaking words that could not be heard but were clearly an apology. Seconds later, Claire herself walked onto her porch smiling before calling out to him. There was no hesitation, no lingering glance, no inappropriate behavior of any kind. The photograph circulating online had frozen a single second. The video revealed the truth. Claire quietly thanked the manager and requested a copy of the recording. That evening the neighborhood gathered for the monthly community meeting inside the clubhouse, where residents usually discussed landscaping projects, holiday decorations, and local events. The room buzzed with uneasy conversation long before the meeting officially began. Marcus had not planned to attend, but Lily convinced him anyway. "Good people do not have to hide," she whispered as they walked through the doors together. Marcus smiled proudly at his daughter and took a seat near the back of the room. Claire arrived a few moments later carrying a small flash drive. She did not sit down. Instead, she walked calmly to the front of the room before the meeting could begin. "Before we discuss anything else," she said with steady confidence, "there is something I need everyone to see." The room gradually fell silent. She connected the flash drive to the projector, and within seconds the security footage filled the large screen. Nobody spoke while the recording played from beginning to end. Every resident watched Marcus immediately turn away. Every resident watched Claire step outside smiling. Every resident watched the beginning of a conversation that no photograph had ever captured. When the lights came back on, the room remained completely still. Claire looked around at her neighbors one by one. "I was there," she said gently. "The story being shared online is false. Marcus treated me with complete respect from the very first second. If anyone should be correcting the record, it is me." She paused before continuing with quiet conviction. "Kind people should never lose their reputation because someone chose to tell half of the truth." No one interrupted her. No one argued. Across the room, Marcus sat motionless beside Lily, overwhelmed not by applause or celebration, but by something far more meaningful. One courageous voice had restored what endless rumors had nearly stolen, and for the first time in days, the silence surrounding him no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful. The meeting ended quietly, not with applause or dramatic speeches, but with neighbors walking one by one toward Marcus to offer handshakes, sincere apologies, and grateful smiles. He accepted every apology with the same calm humility that had defined him from the beginning. "Thank you," he would simply say. "Let us move forward." There was no bitterness in his voice. No desire to embarrass anyone who had believed the rumor. As people slowly filtered out of the clubhouse, Claire remained standing near the window, watching the last colors of sunset stretch across the neighborhood she had only recently begun calling home. Marcus approached her after Lily wandered outside to watch fireflies gathering near the flower beds. For a few moments neither of them spoke. The silence between them no longer carried uncertainty. It carried trust. Finally Marcus smiled gently. "You did not have to do all of that." Claire looked at him with quiet surprise. "Yes, I did." He shook his head. "Most people would have stayed out of it." She folded her arms loosely. "Most people were not there that morning." Marcus lowered his eyes for a second. "You protected my reputation." Claire answered softly, "No. I protected the truth." The evening breeze moved through the open clubhouse doors, carrying the scent of freshly watered grass and blooming jasmine. Somewhere across the park, children laughed while chasing one another beneath the glowing streetlights. Life continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened, yet both of them knew something important had changed. Marcus looked toward Lily playing happily outside. "She has been smiling again," he said quietly. "Thank you for giving that back to her." Claire followed his gaze. "She deserves a father she can always be proud of." Marcus smiled faintly. "She already had one." Claire nodded. "Exactly." They walked together toward the parking lot at an unhurried pace. Before reaching their vehicles, Claire stopped beneath an old maple tree whose branches swayed gently above them. She took a slow breath as though gathering the courage to finish a conversation that had quietly begun weeks earlier. "Marcus," she said, "there is something I have wanted to tell you for a long time." He waited patiently. "Do you remember the first morning we met?" He laughed softly. "I do not think I could ever forget it." Claire smiled. "Neither could I." She looked up through the leaves before meeting his eyes again. "When I smiled and told you to take responsibility, I was never talking about that accident." Marcus looked puzzled. Claire continued gently. "I had already noticed you before that day. I saw how you spoke to Lily every morning before school. I saw how you carried groceries for Mrs. Henderson without telling anyone. I saw you fixing your fence while stopping every few minutes just to wave at children riding their bicycles. Marcus blinked in surprise. You noticed all of that? Every bit of it. Claire smiled warmly. Then that morning happened, and instead of reacting with embarrassment or making excuses, you immediately looked away and apologized even though you could have pretended nothing happened. That told me everything I needed to know about your character. Marcus remained silent. Claire's voice grew softer. So when I said you had to take responsibility, what I really meant was this. She paused, her eyes shining with quiet sincerity. You had already brought kindness back into a house that had forgotten how to laugh. You helped Lily feel like she had another safe place to belong. You helped me remember that trusting someone was not the same as losing someone. I wanted you to stay because your goodness had already become part of our lives. Marcus felt emotion rise gently in his chest, not from surprise alone, but from hearing someone understand the quiet choices he had made for years without expecting anyone to notice. As the first stars appeared above Maple Ridge, he realized that sometimes the greatest gift was not being admired for extraordinary achievements. Sometimes it was simply being truly seen for the ordinary kindness that had quietly shaped an entire life. Autumn arrived quietly in Maple Ridge, dressing every maple tree in shades of crimson, amber, and gold. The cool morning air carried the familiar scent of wood smoke and fresh coffee drifting from neighborhood kitchens, while fallen leaves danced across the sidewalks where children hurried toward school with backpacks bouncing behind them. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one built not on extraordinary events but on ordinary moments shared with extraordinary care. Marcus still left for work before sunrise each morning, but now there was often another porch light glowing beside his own. Claire would step outside carrying 2 steaming travel mugs, handing one to him before either of them spoke. They had discovered that some mornings did not require conversation. Quiet companionship had become its own language. Lily loved those mornings most of all. She would stand between them holding her lunchbox, pretending to judge whose hot chocolate tasted better before declaring another cheerful tie. One Saturday afternoon the entire neighborhood gathered for the annual Maple Ridge Harvest Festival. Families decorated booths with pumpkins, hay bales, and handmade wreaths while local musicians played gentle country songs beneath a white pavilion in the town square. Children laughed as they searched for hidden scarecrows, and neighbors who had once whispered uncertain rumors now greeted Marcus with genuine respect. Reputation had returned, not because he demanded it, but because truth had patiently found its voice. As the afternoon faded into a soft golden evening, Marcus asked Claire if she would walk with him toward the small wooden footbridge crossing the neighborhood pond. Lily smiled knowingly before running ahead with several friends to feed the ducks. The water reflected the fiery colors of autumn leaves like a painted mirror, disturbed only by gentle ripples spreading toward the shore. Marcus rested both hands on the smooth wooden railing and smiled quietly. Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me? Claire laughed. I have a feeling you are never going to let me forget. He reached into the pocket of his flannel jacket and removed a small velvet box. Claire's smile slowly faded into astonished silence. Marcus looked into her eyes with the same quiet sincerity she had first recognized on that unforgettable morning. You once told me I had to take responsibility, he said softly. At the time I thought you were joking. Later I realized you were inviting me into a future I could not yet imagine. He opened the box, revealing a simple white gold ring that reflected the warm autumn sunlight. Claire Sullivan, I cannot promise a perfect life. I cannot promise there will never be difficult seasons. But I can promise to keep choosing kindness, honesty, and our family every single day that God allows me to wake up. Will you marry me? Claire covered her mouth as grateful tears filled her eyes. She nodded before she could even find her voice. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Marcus. I will. At that exact moment Lily came running across the bridge, stopping just short of them as though she already understood what had happened. She looked from the ring to Claire and then back to her father before wrapping both of them in the biggest hug her small arms could manage. "Does this mean we are really going to be one family?" she asked hopefully. Claire knelt beside her and gently brushed a strand of hair behind Lily's ear. "Only if you would like that." Lily smiled so brightly that the entire autumn afternoon seemed warmer. "I have wanted that for a long time." Months later, during a small winter wedding attended by family, friends, and grateful neighbors, there were no grand speeches and no dramatic declarations. There was only quiet joy, honest promises, and hearts finally at peace. As snowflakes drifted gently beyond the chapel windows, Marcus looked at Claire, then at Lily standing proudly beside them, and realized that the greatest miracles rarely arrived with flashing lights or loud applause. They often began with a single act of respect, grew through countless moments of quiet kindness, and blossomed into a second chance that no one could have planned. Sometimes destiny does not arrive because two people are perfect. Sometimes it begins because, when an unexpected moment tests someone's character, they choose dignity over pride, grace over fear, and truth over misunderstanding. In the end, that choice became the foundation of a home where love no longer needed to prove itself because every quiet day together was already the proof.